Tucker, thank you so much, and g'day, welcome to Australia.
Well, thanks for having me.
Tucker, there's always been idiots in universities, there's always been super left-wing politicians, there's always been blowhards in the media. But why does it feel that the left is more empowered than ever before to get away with some of the things they want to do to change our world for the worst?
I don't know, empowered, I would say hysterical. I think they've lost control of them. No, I'm sincere. And by the way, I don't hate liberals. I have a lot of I live in Washington. It's a liberal city. I have a lot of friends who are liberal. But there's something about the American left right now that's changed, I think you're right, in a meaningful way. And I think they feel threatened. I think they feel their hold on power threatened. This last election, the fall election in the United States, was basically a revolt of the middle class against the elites. They're the elites. And they deeply resented, and all of a sudden they saw their power ebbing away, and they do what all failing regimes do, which is they try to crack down. I mean, this is what Ceausescu did in the waning days of his regime in Romania. You try to consolidate power and round up dissidents and torture political opposition, et cetera, because you feel yourself losing control. I think that's what's going on.
But it also feels that the promise of Trump to actually deliver that change that would take away power from the elites and the institutions, from afar, there seems to be a slight frustration that he filled his cabinet with a lot of, Goldman Sachs and semi-establishment people. It feels like he cops all the criticism for being the wrecking ball who's pulling everything apart, but it's hard to see from here who are the great figures of revolution that he's brought with him to Washington that are actually doing anything to change the system.
Maybe you need to be on a continent far away to see American politics clearly, because what you just said is entirely true. Nobody here says it, and yet it's demonstrable. I mean, you're exactly right. The promise of the Trump election was a sweeping away of the failed leadership of the country, which really had done a terrible job with the economy, with the foreign policy, with the social policy. That just hadn't led very effectively. And Trump was, as you said, a reaction against that. How surprising it has been to see this administration populated by representatives of the establishment he ran against, Goldman Sachs, as you just said. For some reason, though, that reality, the fact that Trump as a president has not been radical at all, not radical enough in the view of a lot of people who voted for him, that fact has not reached the American left. Like, they don't know that. They think that this is fascism in progress. They're unable to see clearly what it really is, which is something very far from fascism. It's too disorganized to be fascism. The hallmark of fascism, right, is kind of like, rigid efficiency. There's none of that here.
Yeah, correct. I mean, because that to me is always the thinking and the calculation, which is, if they're going to pretend that you're a wrecking ball, if they're going to criticise you like a wrecking ball, then be the bloody wrecking ball. I mean, be what they criticise you to be, because they're not going to give you credit for being almost the wrecking ball.
No, I think I can't add anything to that. That's very wise, and I wish you lived here in the United States. It's funny that you're able to pick all that up from so far away, but that's exactly right. And by the way, again, nobody says that. They act as if everything is changing. Actually, not very much has changed at all. It's very disappointing that way.
Well, I appreciate that you saying that. I'd love to be in your country, even for a week. Let's have a chat about obviously part of what came with Trump was this sensation to me when there are figures that they call them the alt-right, but there's lots of other people like Milo Yiannopoulos, like Gavin McGuinness, and I think people like yourself. Now, you're not all the same thing. You don't have all the same way of expressing yourself. But is it fair to say that conservatism is the new punk? Because the sacred cows that the left keep going after aren't the sacred cows anymore. It's the left that's the sacred cow now.
Exactly. I mean, I'm 48 years old, so I grew up with liberals who imagined themselves speaking out in opposition against the establishment, right? They were the counterbalance to the establishment, the uptight, rigid, conservative establishment that ran the country. Now the establishment of the country is populated, controlled entirely by liberals. All of it. the entertainment establishment, the media establishment, the political establishment, business, finance, all of it is controlled by liberals. And so liberals are the ones with prerogatives to preserve. They're the ones who are, rigid and reactionary. And so the people speaking up against the establishment are people on the right. And of course, like establishments always do, they're trying to crush those voices because it's very inconvenient when you're in power to be criticized. So you attempt to silence people who have a problem with what you're doing. And in this case, liberals are just using the language they always have. Oh, you're a white supremacist or racist, whatever. It's just noise. What they're really doing is trying to preserve the good deal that they have set up for themselves, just like every establishment does.
And in terms of where conservatism goes from here, I mean, it's fair to say, obviously, Trump is the big victory. But what's the next battle? Is it? I mean, obviously, it's easy to say the midterms, but can conservatism maintain the strength and the rage that brought about, a giant cleaning effect that was supposed to be the Trump administration? Where do you see conservatism going from here?
I mean, the Republican Party, and by the way, at some point the Democratic Party will break up into its constituent parts because it's a party about identity politics, so it'll fracture into a million little ethnic groups at some point. But in the short term, the Republican Party has a problem because its constituent parts don't agree with one another. There's no consensus on what it is to be a Republican, what the Republican foreign policy looks like, what the Republican Party's economic policy looks like. So there's got to be a reckoning. I think the party will break in half, basically, with the older kind of establishment Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, for example, types basically becoming Democrats, and the party becoming more a nationalist party, hopefully a soft national, not a bigoted nationalist party, but just a pro-America party. I think that's likely to happen. In the short term, though, the debate is really immigration. I mean, that's kind of everything, because demographics is everything. Democrats, liberals support higher immigration levels because those are new Democratic voters. It's about consolidating their power. It's really that simple. And Republicans, conservatives, traditional Americans, if there's any hope that the country's going to continue sort of in the way that it has for 220 years, you've got to get a hold on who comes into the country. You can't have open borders. Everything will be completely different. It's happened to the state of California already. So the core debate, the core reason Trump got elected is immigration.
Well, the joy of us being an island is that we're able to literally turn boats around that try to come here illegally and send them back to Asian islands like Indonesia. It's very effective. It's very popular. So that's why I always have some sympathy for the wall argument, which is if you literally don't have the border of ocean, then you've got to come up with some sort of other physical barrier. But do you think that this thing can ever be built, or in 4 years' time we'll be talking about a metaphorical wall?
Well, I mean, all of these debates begin with, a rhetorical case. Do we have a right to control who comes into the country? And unfortunately, what you're seeing now is the fruit of 40 years of American high school and college students being taught to hate themselves and their country and their culture. I don't think that's quite happened in Australia to the extent it has here, but I think a lot of Americans are convinced that we don't have a moral right to keep anybody from coming to the United States. And by coming to the United States, it's not just coming here for a new life, but coming here and getting in all kinds of federal and state programs, basically becoming wards of the state. We don't have a right to say no to that. And so that's really the case that needs to be made before the wall is built, before any of the legislative action can happen. You need to convince people that it's their country and that there's nothing wrong with saying, it's not bigoted to say, we have a right to determine who comes here.
Well, also, what I always find really misleading about the immigration debate is that the left wants to pretend that any attempt to control your borders somehow means, we're putting the closed for business sign up. No, there is a front door. You do take refugees. You do have a green card process. There is a way to apply to join the club of the United States or to join the club of Australia. Yet they want to pretend that doing something at the unfettered end of immigration somehow means you're denying all people who want to come to the country, and that is just manifestly untrue. I mean, the way they bounce between illegal immigration and immigration rhetorically, I think is an absolute example of how they deliberately try to blur that line.
Well, of course. And the economic truth is really what this is about. A third of the American population, working age population, is not working right now. So that's a massive problem. It's not reflected in the official numbers, but it's real and it's obvious when you drive around the middle of the country. The pro-immigration case is being pushed by employers who seek, above all, lower labor costs, as every employer does. They've entered into this bizarre marriage with the social justice left, the ones calling you racist. They're funded by big business.
Yeah.
There's never been a more pernicious or destructive coupling in American political history than the one we're seeing now between big business and the radical left. It's really, really powerful and bad and dishonest and contrary to the interests of the country, in my view.
And just finally, because I've taken up too much of your time already, but in Australia, we had the statues debate, as you did in the United States. Our debate began because of your debate. We are having, this self-hating people who want to change our version of Independence Day, Australia Day, who want to change all of the symbols about modernity that means we are having this conversation with this technology in this country right now. What's your advice to the everyday Australian about how to stay vigilant and how to fight what is in many ways, in my view, an ideological cancer?
It is. It's never about the statues. I mean, look, the truth is no great civilization has an unblemished history. Sins are committed, all the way along the course of any civilization, okay? So to be honest about that, there's no reason to lie about it, but it doesn't mean the civilization itself is not worth defending or protecting. It is. This isn't about statues. It's about delegitimizing your country, your civilization. It's about saying you don't have a right to say no to whatever program are going to ram down your throat. That's what it's about. It's about softening you up. This is an ideological artillery barrage against your culture. And so know that going in. Don't cave on it. Stand up for the basic values of Australian life, free speech, all the things that come with citizenship. I mean, it's worth standing up for those because there are forces that would like to overturn them, for sure.
As we would say, bloody oath. Tucker Carlson, an absolute honour to be able to talk to you on the telly. All the best for continued success on Fox News.
Well, thanks a million. I appreciate it.
A lot of fun talking to him. He's a very clever fella. If you want to watch his show live, it is a spectacular show. 10 o'clock Eastern is when you can see it on the Fox News channel. We may talk to him many more times in the Trump era.